dealing with a really old world industry, right? Think of trucks and freight and this big $13 trillion global logistics industry. Everything here came on a truck, right? I mean, all the materials for the hotel, like shirts on our backs. So think about this like global network of things being moved on trucks. And when you bring it down to sort of the lowest common denominator, you have a truck driver and you have a truck and it's full of goods and it's got to go somewhere, right? So in the US, we spend $700 billion a year just moving goods from point A to point B. It's a really old industry, and this was much easier when we had railroads as the primary utility. So like 60 to 100 years ago, we switched from railroads to trucks, and like a lot of problems came with that. Railroads were simple. We knew, who the 10 owners were. We knew what their basic reputation was. There was 100 cars in a row. They'd arrive on time. And then when that fragmented and trucks became the primary utility for delivering goods, things got really complicated, right? So today you have all these small businesses trying to hook up, and it's like a really hard thing to achieve. So when you're using cryptocurrency to solve a real world business, you have to come from that business, and I do. I've spent 20 years in logistics. I've spun up a lot of mid-sized companies. I started working a little late in life and at 27, but actually took my first logistics company public by the time I was 30. So I've moved to over $1 billion of freight, and freight's like a cool business. Everyone's themselves. You have billionaires in freight and little kids doing sales, and they all eat the same steak and they all hang out at the same places. So you get to learn a lot really quickly. So the way that we hook up all these small businesses today is through brokers. Let me give you a sense of how fragmented it is, right? There's 15 million trucks on the road. Let's just talk about the US for starters. 15 million trucks on the road. 90% of these are housed in companies with 6 trucks or less, right? On the manufacturer side, there's like 500,000 manufacturers and distributors, all small businesses. Like less than 4,000 have over 500 employees. So we network all of these people together through brokers. So $700 billion business with $100 billion brokerage. The brokerage is really good at certain things. Like they put people together, they get shit from point A to point B, but there's a tremendous amount of waste in the industry. The reason that we use brokers is they understand reputation of people that we're dealing with. Like me as a shipper going to ship goods with a trucker, I have no idea who he is. It's a blind transaction, it's an unsafe transaction, there's a lot of fraud. There are like these Craigslist type things I can go on to book freight, but brokerages, if I'm a trucker and call them up, they'll know every shipment I've ever done with them. They'll have micro data on me, like how often am I late? How many times have I dropped off a load right before I was supposed to pick it up? How many times have I had crashes? Things of that nature. So when you go on these public Craigslist boards, all I get to know is like, what's your driving record and is your insurance up to speed? So like what we're trying to do is basically give someone someone's credit info before you go on a date. I think is about the best analogy. And I think we're like a perfect use case for blockchain and a perfect use case for a token. Like blockchains are great at disintermediating data and having a historical memory. So we're taking the data out of these walled gardens of these brokerages and bringing them onto the blockchain. Like to tell you how important this is for the industry, truckers make $43,000 a year. No one cares that they're driving around half empty. This is the backbone of American commerce, and it's completely inefficient, right? Where drivers are aging out, there's not going to be enough globally to fill all the roles. They'd rather be an Uber driver and make the same money and see their families at night. The biggest kind of macro way to understand the inefficiency in this business is to understand that there's not enough trucks to pick up all the goods in the world, but last year in the US, there were 29 billion empty miles driven. So we today are paying the brokerage $200 billion. Today, the brokerages are making $200 billion. $200 million today for the privilege of kind of getting that wrong. So let's talk about the brokerages, right? There's 16,000 brokerages in the US. The top 25 made a third of the revenue last year, $34 billion. Those are the ones that we're going after. We don't think you can have a successful marketplace, no matter how beautiful it is, without a brokerage system. So we are encouraging independent brokers to come on our system and bring their deal flow. A little broker who has like a business in the Midwest right now, I get why everyone talks so fast. You see that damn clock. So a little broker in the Midwest who's like really good at doing cold logistics within 2 states wants to do a coast-to-coast shipment. He can't do it right now. He goes on these Craigslist boards. He doesn't really know what to do. Using our system, he gets all the reach of large brokerages. Sort of an aha moment for me, as I own a distribution company now. We spend about $5 million a year on freight, and we negotiated a deal with FedEx to get an 87% discount on their network. I thought I had to use a big brokerage for that. So Anyway, this, you put it all into a blockchain network to get all the data so it can be seen by anyone. A token, the only good reason that I personally know of for a token outside of blockchain as a means of exchange is to prevent future censorship of information. So we're not a guy carrying his money out of Africa, which is a pretty basic understanding of censoring a human right. But here we're doing a token to keep everything in one system so that that information doesn't get re-siloed in the future. Let me talk quickly about sort of one other side of this business that I think is pretty important. The credit market in this business is totally upside down, right? Truckers float the $700 billion market right now, and they don't have access to cheap credit. The two biggest brokerages, C.H. Robinson and TQL Logistics, charge 5% for a one-day pay to truckers. And they can do it because they have deal flow. The rest go to factoring companies. So truckers are paying between 2 to 5%. That's a 24 to 60% credit market for guys who need cash flow to grow their businesses. So it's a pretty usurious kind of state. Freight Network will actually go after truckers for trade finance as a way to get them onto the rails. So eventually we'll have a peer-to-peer lending platform and a peer-to-peer booking platform, but we'll facilitate a lot of that at first. Very important point about us is we do not require people to use fiat. We don't expect truckers or shippers to all of a sudden, start using freight tokens, We don't require them to use tokens. So we have a whole brokerage layer, right? Independent brokers can hold freight token and loan them out to those parties. So if I'm a broker and you're doing a $1,000 shipment, I can loan you that $1,000 of stake for, say, 1 point. A shipment takes 2 days. I can loan that same $1,000 150 times a year for 1%, and it's still a pretty good deal, and it's an incredible credit market. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing. There's a lot more on our website, freight.network. We have incredible advisors, and I'll sort of talk about the ICO process a little bit from there. What I love about this whole deal is community, right? And I had a community of me and my best friend who lived in the same building, and we both jumped into crypto. And we were both like grown men with real businesses and families, and it started as that small community. And we had to build efficacy around our projects. So you start with just like a business plan, an idea in mind, and kind of your own aha moment, and then you start going to these conventions and building more community. At first, what I loved about the idea of all of this was that it's a non-traditional fundraising mechanism, right? We get to go and capitalize 5 years of a business up front. We're already looking at purchasing a company in Los Angeles that does last mile solutions. We're already in discussions with Restoration Hardware about fixing their last mile of freight. My CTO is there today, and I'm supposed to only say that for investors, but I guess I screwed up. We're in conversations with one of the largest furniture manufacturers in the world to give them end-to-end transparency on their entire supply chain. We're able to do that because we're capitalizing the business up front. So the ICO process has been really interesting. We actually had a very small community of 100 people in Telegram, and we opened it up to a private pre-sale 3 weeks ago. We just sort of had an instinct that there was something going on and a real conversation. And with those 100 people, we raised $1.3 million in 5 days. We then shut it down because we linked up with 3 really great advisories in this space, and we'd kind of been courting them and heard back from them. And we've teamed up with them now, and in the last 2 weeks, we've raised an additional $6 million. So we are at 7.2 million. We've sold 22% of our tokens, and we've built an amazing community. I thought I was getting into this business to raise money and build something. And look, I've raised a lot of venture debt. I've been around the world with it. It's not fun. It's a very lonely process, right? And so in coming into this whole thing, I thought I got to snag the right advisory. I got to go and meet the right people. And what I found was that it all kind of wasn't true. We are reinventing the world. Blockchain is an incredibly powerful technology. I happen to be tying it to real world assets. A lot of the people here are tying it to more ephemeral things or more digital things, but we're building a community of people and we're doing this together. And I feel like I'm getting in, right as this industry goes from OG to corporate. So I didn't have any slides for you today, I apologize, but I did bring, because I really want to win, and I think Crystal will like this. That's the first time my daughter held my other daughter. She's 30 days old now. Look at that, come on, look at that, look at that. Okay.